Stovall for the Sam Bloom Agency, it is noted that in a period of approximately 10 weeks, Oswald worked on the Sam Bloom assignment on 60 different days. Now, there's much in the Warren Report on the coincidence that Lee Harvey Oswald was in the book depository. See, this is how Mrs. Payne called Roy Truly and said, somebody's living with me and her husband needs a job. And the coincidence that the motorcade slowed down at 10 miles an hour around that curve through the underpass, and that the building was never covered that day. No one was on the roof or the windows or anywhere near the building, and the building wasn't closed off for 25 minutes. These are all coincidences the Commission wants you to think about.
You have a whole section in your files on coincidences.
Oh, yeah, the whole thing on coincidences. But here you have the Warren Commission aware of problems. This is in April. They're bringing up the subject of the Sam Bloom agency. Now, I have cross-filed all of these sections and read the 26 volumes, it's supposed to be I don't know how many million words, carefully over and over. And there is no mention of a Sam Bloom in that. So that the information that they pulled in was what they wanted to have. Some of it they didn't mean to have, but some they wanted to have. Now, here's a letter from Mr. Lee J. Rankin, the chief counsel of the Warren Commission, directed to J. Edgar Hoover. The date on this is September the 9th, 1964. That's an interesting date because the Warren Report's going to come out 2 weeks later. Dear Mr. Hoover, why did the FBI chief in Dallas, Gordon Shanklin, state that the paraffin test run on Oswald's face was positive when the actual laboratory affidavit shows it to be negative on the face and that he could not have fired a rifle? Would you please ascertain whether Mr. Shanklin made any remarks on the subject of the paraffin test? Signed, J. Lee Rankin. Like that one?
Was there any follow-up on that?
Oh, no, the Warren Report came out a week later. 2 weeks.
It was already printed by that time.
It was gone to print. You see, since May, they'd been worrying about how they're going to cover up the credibility. But in their own minds, we're talking about the evidence of a murder. See, they said, don't emphasize the information, the facts. Stress the credibility of the Commission and the amount of witnesses called. You see, here's a KPOX television or radio news announcement that came over the air on November the 22nd, 1963 in Dallas. Sam Pate reporting live. Speculation is that 3 or more men were involved in the shooting. One man with a clenched fist said he was a pro-Castro. Oswald did hold his fist up in that way. But he doesn't admit anything. But he is a prime suspect. Captain Fritz says the man is still a prime suspect. End quotes. There was no other suspect. There's photographs of people being taken off the street, and I showed one on a television show here, but no other suspect. Here is a real WBAP television, November 22nd, 1963, in Dallas. Dr. Malcolm Perry, attendant surgeon at Parkland Hospital, Lieutenant President Kennedy, when he arrived at the emergency room, noticed the president was in critical condition with a wound in the neck and head. When asked to specify, Perry said the entrance wound was in the front of the head, and he might have meant it had gone in one temple and out the other. That was the wound. There's so many, many remarks that he was sure that day they were entrance wounds in the head and in the throat. News report, WBAP, November 22nd, 1963. President Kennedy and Governor Connally of Texas and their wives were riding together in the president's convertible. They were leaving downtown Dallas at the time the assassination occurred near a triple culvert, and the shot that was fired at the president was fired from apparently the 5th floor of a warehouse by a 7.65 Mauser. That's a German Army rifle. Apparently 3 shots were fired. One struck the president in the right temple and went cleanly through his head. A White House physician said it was simply a case of a bullet going clear through a man's head. That's the way the news read. But you see, apparently the 5th floor, 7.65 Mauser.
That was the 5th floor. I thought it was the 6th floor.
Well, they did find a Mauser on the 5th floor. You see, this is the point. Later, it became an Italian Carcano.
Right.
But when the police chief took it away, and he should know weapons, and they all examined it for 24 hours, it was a Mauser. And many people want to know, how did I get into my assassination inquiry on November 22nd? I read you the bulletins of the news office. The case is closed, no conspiracy, right. The German Mauser. These are the things that whetted my appetite. You can see they were all coming over. Now, here's a letter from Mr. Lee J. Rankin of the Commission to Mr. J. Edgar Hoover. we talked before about the paraffin test. This is dated July 23rd, 1964. Dear Mr. Hoover, it has been alleged that the palm print lifted from Oswald's rifle by the Dallas police is false. This allegation is supported by the statement that the FBI told the press in an off-the-record briefing session November 23rd or 4th that there was no palm print on that rifle. Would you notify us at any time if the FBI told you or let it be known to the press that there was no palm print on that rifle?
Because
this is what
you had just stated in the beginning.
Oh, yes.
About the palm print.
Yeah. In August of 1964, a letter went to Mr. J. Edgar Hoover saying there's a conflict between the testimony of Mr. Latone of the Bureau, this is what we were talking about before, and Lieutenant J.C. Day of the Dallas Police. And we would like to have a statement from Lieutenant Day setting forth specifically and in detail what steps he took in the processing of the weapon for prints and the description of any instructions he may have received in that connection and from whom he received them.
Was anything more done on this, May?
No, this was in August. The Warren report came out in September. The ballistics, the rifle ownership, the palm print, the paraffin test were all negatives, you see. No, nothing. The Warren report was written before the gun went off for all practical purposes. Mr. Rankin wrote to J. Edgar Hoover, we'd like to have the statement of Lieutenant Day as to when and why he turned the weapon over to the FBI and the exact circumstances under which he did it, when he first noticed the palm print, and who, if anyone, he told about it at the time. You see, this print was to come 7 days later in Washington, and nobody knew about it out in Dallas. Who he told about at the time. And we'd like to have copies of any written reports he made about that print, as well as the photographs which he may have taken of that print that was on the rifle. Lieutenant Day should be questioned concerning his usual practice in photographing prints and establishing beyond question that a print, in fact, appeared on a particular object from which it was claimed to have been lifted. And if he did not follow his usual practice in the instant case, we would like to know why he did not. And we'd like to know what precautions he took to protect that print, which he claimed still remained on the rifle when it went to Washington.
But they didn't find any on the rifle when it got to Washington.
No. Now, at the time of the assassination, Gloria, Marguerite Oswald went right away to the public officials, and she said my son was an agent of the CIA, and of course they put her down. But August 21st, 1964, William Coleman, the attorney for one of the attorneys for the Warren Commission, wrote to another higher-up official who was doing work and said, I'm sending my comments on Lee Harvey Oswald's life in Russia, and in the foreign conspiracy section, do you think we ought to deal with the question, 1, was Oswald a CIA agent? And 2, whether the ease with which he got his second passport raised any inference of conspiracy? Question mark. Now, this is a letter dated August 21st. Remember that the memos I read at the beginning of the show are telling you how we'll pass off on these open minds the validity of the commission, the credibility of the work, the amount of people called. The Warren Commission itself was filled with doubts all through July, August, September. They hadn't even scratched the surface, and I've been scratching it for 8 years, and I'm ready to go to Washington now and say, look, this is my work, this is what I know, this by your own admission is what you haven't even gone into. Why were these men sending the memos? Here's another letter that's interesting. This one is from Bert Griffin of the Warren Commission to Mr. Howard Willans, another attorney, dated August 14th. The dates are important because the report's coming out in September. It says, regarding Jack Ruby's testimony, both the preface and the conclusion of the Warren report that they're writing up now, they're polishing it up, state that the commission found no evidence that anyone assisted Jack Ruby in the shooting of Lee Oswald. Certainly, it is true that there is insufficient evidence to conclude that any particular person assisted Ruby. Nonetheless, we have not conducted an investigation which would effectively exhaust the possibility that someone did assist Ruby, even if that assistance were unwitting. And inasmuch as Ruby is alive and will continue to dicker concerning his fate, I think it is a mistake for the Commission to make any statement which indicates that its investigation in this regard is exhaustive. I would prefer to state the facts that we have uncovered and to remain silent on the issue of whether anybody not connected with the assassination of President Kennedy could have assisted Ruby. is that I do think that our investigation in the question of whether or not there was a tie-in between Ruby and the assassination is adequate to conclude there was no tie-in. Their investigation so far, but to make the further suggestion that no one aided or encouraged Ruby is a risk we should not incur. End quote. Well, we could go for 5 hours. It's a shame to break the continuity, because I think some people may forget next week to listen, and other people will pick up next week. And it would be nice sometime to just do a marathon of reading the commission memos to each other and have people jot them down in some way and get it into their head that this is...
I don't think, the last document you read about Ruby, I don't think it has occurred to people that there might have been help in the death of Lee Harvey Oswald, because so many people saw that film of Jack Ruby shooting Lee Harvey Oswald in the police hallway, that I think they would just take that as fact.
Yeah, but the important thing in terms of world history of power is who gained by him silencing the Patsy.
Then you have to remember the 10 bullets in Bobby Kennedy.
In the Ambassador?
In the Ambassador, and then the discrepancies in the bullets in President Kennedy.
Oh, yes, it goes on, but it's very important to see if you understand what the Warren Commission is writing. The logic is that they said there's insufficient evidence, but he says we haven't even conducted an investigation. And this was in August of 1964. I have spent 8 years on the links of Ruby to the people involved in the assassination. And I can go to Washington now and say, look, this is what had happened, this is the banks they used, this is where they met. And Ruby did not have to know Oswald. But here is the commission just about ready to go to print. And they have nowhere wanted to find the truth. There was no reason for them to close the hearings. And the consensus was, the orders were get it done before the election. Richard Russell, the senator from Georgia, and Senator Cooper did not want to close the commission findings. They felt that even though it was an election year, the truth would be better served. And the other men were overpowering in their influence, and they closed up the Warren report. It had a date. Everything has a date in this country to affect elections. Why is this timely? Why is the research timely now? Because you're going to have elections in 72 and everything's packaged for your heads, as we roll along. Do we have time for one more letter, Gloria?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I will take a few calls when the show is over. Not too many, but I'll take a few if you want to call in and ask a few questions. I'll take one more. Here's a letter from William Coleman and David Slauson to the attorney staff of Mr. Ball, Bellin, Jenner, and Liebler, dated March the 16th. It says, the following statement was made by Nelson Delgado, a former Marine buddy of Oswald's. Delgado advised us because of the nature of their assignment in Santa Ana, the Marines were required to fire the rifle only once a year. This is what I was talking about. And Oswald and all the others joined in this pool. And Oswald just about did qualify. And it had always been Delgado's opinion that Oswald penciled in his qualifying score. It was Delgado's further opinion that Oswald was not a good shot while he was with the Marines at Santa Ana, California, and he never showed any unusual interest in rifles or guns at all. He was just average in the Marines in terms of shooting. And
well, whoever fired those bullets
did a good job.
Would almost have to be classified a marksman, wouldn't they?
Yes, they'd have to be pretty good marksmen. Here's a letter from Mr. Bellin to Mr. Jenner, dated February the 14th, and it is regards to the home where Marina Oswald lived with Michael and Ruth Payne. Michael Payne was a nuclear physicist, a designer of helicopters that built aerospace with security clearances, third generation Harvard. His grandfather graduated from Harvard University. He went to Harvard, and Michael Payne was the host of Lee and Marina at his home. He was separated at the time from Ruth Payne, but the day of the assassination, he moved right in. Marina had 3 friends that she visited at different times, Elena Hall, Ruth Payne, and there was one other that while she was there, the husbands were away, but as soon as Marina left, the husbands came back. Do we have time for this one letter, or are we running short of time?
Yeah, we are running short.
Okay, well, we can do this next week, Gloria.
But you will be here for a few minutes after the show to take any phone calls.
If you have a few questions, yes.
Thank you again, Mae.